Sanjay Chedam Sanjay Shamanda Chandrapada Tambe Jasu Daye Chuni Dive Tsomange Drola Pencher Sanjay Prabhash Sanjay Chedam Sanjay Shamanda Chandrapada Tambe Jasu Daye Chuni Dive Tsomange Drola Pencher Sanjay Prabhash Sanjay Chedam Sanjay Shamanda Chandrapada Tambe Jasu Daye Chuni Dive Tsomange Drola Pencher Sanjay Prabhash Deva Sensam Bache, Uma Bache, that Tamegi, Pejichiba Isare, Paki Matsiki Monkey Sadi, the Shah Pondo Shedan, that in the Monkey Sadi, Susiki, Lugi Tasha Yuchi, Jeva Mato, Paki, the Lug Gesadi down, Paki, when the Chini Tungo Maris.
The tenet systems, the Tatantrika, the Chittamatra, and the Madhyamika. So these three tenet systems, they're the same in the sense that they say with regard to afflictions such as attachment, aversion, and so forth, what the object of those afflictions is something which is merely imputed by the mind, it's merely designated by the mind. The object is not what is being focused, what is focused on, or what the mind focuses on, does not exist in reality.
Legi Tasha Jodda, we need to tingle Maris lay the cheaper in we need to carry and Lay Tasha Jodda carry, but in that carry, we need to do Zinchidan, Midamita, Yoinsa, Diwangi, and in between Kodita, Taraj, shorter edge.
So saying that whatever appears to the affliction or whatever the affliction takes to mind, and then the reality not actually being concordant in the sense that there's a discrepancy between what the affliction takes to mind and what is reality, well then how does the mind perceive phenomena of the affliction? How does it do that? And what is reality? Well, from the point of view of Rose, then the different tenet systems have different explanations, and therefore there's also different explanations with regard to how there's such discrepancy.
In the midi Trosane and Pagi Nala Lechane and the Condo de Raja Sadigor, the midi to churches. That the Nimachini Trosane detendigor. In the Tinegaso, Lodigita midi sim, that Condo Sasaji Shabura. This is a little tabaramato, Penguin Nichilla, midi chicks and a Yoshi Dage. Tamatimason, Sunday, that took Kavuchin Dage. And teaching our queen one attended loves queen one dedication 10 days because of the medication in Nikodi, which is when they cheated down, Pagi, non so you lay Taju, the Kavachin, which is a Condosa Sadi. When you cheated Tata de la Sagmida, Condosa Sadi, Susu Tashi to the Sagida. But when you cheated the Sagin, when you see Kurato and Nashin Condosa Sadi, Condo di Kadu de Condosa and Dichel Condomeo Chabra.
Now, to talk about this or explain this situation from a course point of view, well, let's say, for example, there's someone who abuses us verbally, says something negative towards us, or says something negative to us. So, in that case, then anger arises in our continuum. So, the anger itself is a conceptual mind, it's a conceptual awareness. Then the passive is in front of us. But then it's the conceptual mind thing oh, what if that past and they said such and such, they did such and such. So it's the conceptual mind that reflects upon what the person has done. And then even after the person has left, even that person has gone, we still continue conceptually and goes over the fact what they have done again and again. The mind repeats this, the mind repeatedly goes over the negativity and the aversion just remains there. So maybe in actuality, the person towards which the anger was directed has already generated regret. They generated great liking for us. And now since they don't have any negative thought towards us, they're happily sleeping at home. But for us, we continue to hold this grudge, we continue to repeatedly think about what they have done. So this just comes merely from the mind, that really comes from the side of the conceptual consciousness, because in reality the person has changed. And what we perceive with the conceptual mind, with that sort of angry awareness, does no longer exist. So that is not in accordance with reality, because if it were to be in accordance with reality, then the mind would have changed, the object would have changed in the same way as the person has changed in reality. The object of our anger, that person, has changed in reality.
internet survey. Lola and Pomani Jimuch and Tiniam and Gijishi, a Kalichin Kirimbo, Chindi and Kavucha, and Kavuch Kirimbo Chatsani, any the Nalola, and Nijojo Haboche, and the Pay, the Jesonda, the Samsha, the Kavuchi, the Samsha, and Shula and Jojo the Indondochin and Pay, Fonleche, and the Shinashibujumo, the Yenjin and Bulu Simchin Sera, Rashidabri.
So in India there was the situation arose with a young boy who was around 15 years old, and through the internet he contacted a girl who he thought was very nice. So they started chatting over the internet, and then after a long time they started liking each other. The boy started liking her, and they continued on with this relationship until the girl one day said, well, I cannot continue with this because my older brother has found out, my brother has found out about us, and I cannot continue on doing this. So anyway, then she stopped, but the brother pretended to be her and continued with our relationship, and then eventually pulled the guy up and scared him. So this young boy, 15 years old, he got so scared, he got so intimidated, and so he committed suicide as a result. He killed himself as a result due to the threat that he received from the older brother of that girl.
Provincial Hagorwa, that Yahar Lusu, the Chanson Majavan, the Tevache, and Pujashi, Lusu Giorwa, Migiola, Chisan Kiran, Pinja, Kohortan Shas, Shishia Tajutan, and teacher that do any Tigala, and teacher to show the colors and the Bishaki Justin and my police let's see takings.
So actually in India, so the older brother of the girl, so in India it's seen as inappropriate if a girl before marriage has any relationship with a man, with a boy. So therefore, based on that, therefore when the older brother called this younger boy, he said, you cheated my sister, and unless you give me money, I will go to the police. So he threatened this 15-year-old boy saying he would go to the police, and he asked him to give money so that he would go to the police.
The Shula, the police Che, and the Tangian, the Pomochi, the Yonar, Putti Tanter, Bishaki Putti, Party, Pomochi Parsha, and Putti, kissing it some Putti. And Chazashi said, in the Amparacho in Tondoche, and Bishaki. That dealer didn't see the Carichadores, and that Dimela could Kavuchi, look, Korangi Toga Tasha with the Kavuchi Mato, when Nisila Putiro. That way again the party tour. A teacher and Shinachi, when it's in a parent teacher in a Shinachi where Yomaro. 도배 다시 유지를 시도제로 만든 뒤에 삼지 제가 언제 삼을 지에 드리려다 가르쳐 줘요. 그래서 제대로 삼을 드리지랬다. 디니지비도 스스로의 다시 유지를 시도하마다 대랑 생디간의 충디 제어 말이죠. 왜니지를 나보러
So after that, the police investigated and they found out that the brother had pretended the whole time there was no girl. So he had actually pretended the entire time to be this girl and pretended he was chatting with her, and then only at the very end he then called up the boy and threatened him. So therefore in reality the boy actually, it's very clear that he was totally, what he perceived was not there in accordance with reality. It was merely designated or imputed by the mind, and the kind of condition that led to this mistake was this photograph. So it was due to this photograph he perceived this pretty girl, and that then led him to make up these mistaken kind of, led to these mistaken appearances to his mind. And therefore his fear actually, since he hadn't done anything wrong actually, so he didn't need to be scared. He hadn't done anything wrong, but nonetheless he was scared because of his wrong perception of perceiving something that actually wasn't there at all. So Geshe-la is saying, in a way we're like that. We're just like that. Our mind designates, our mind imputes a reality onto things that actually doesn't exist. And so in reality there is no such existence of by way of its own characteristic. There is no existence from the side of the object. But nonetheless our mind designates, our mind labels such a reality. So we're really similar to that boy. The fear that this boy experienced was not based on reality.
제산다 니모제디 무슬르기 파탄 깨바마도 대랑생 쿠란기 추기에 주버도 대견다 제다 지기기로 주인이라고 지기로 쿠란한기 추 아니 다 나시마스.
So actually what really induces our
추 넘버 때데발라는 지기로 야가다 두고다 디 쿠란기 추 넘버 때데밖에 말했어. 무슬르 다음마다.
So here with regard to the affliction, so it's the mind that imputes, that designates. It is due to such designation, such imputation by the mind that the afflictions arise. So it's not that from the side of the object that there is actually that there's something coming from the side of the object. Of course the object may serve as some condition that gives rise to, like the actual person, for example, gives rise to the affliction. However, there is no person from his or her own side. There's nothing that exists by way of its own characteristics, and this doesn't create, therefore this is just created by the mind. So it doesn't come really from the side of the object. Geshe-la can stress that again, but it is just created by the mind, fabricated by the awareness.
That benata kalaurita chamdavata cham icho somsachilaya lo ta sumjui learning gita poine pomula shana tirata pomoto yuna ta ngobo chigrata ngobo chigotela susui gita minamita ta korangi ene phamagi ene nge bugu sen tarwa bugul ta sen ta ba insa zewaji dwa korangi ya bugu dusugi ama sen ta na amal ni zewaji dwa korangi garo yina da choga yina da digi ene pagi dushagi ton ta ba insa dushagi dwa korangi ta digi a duja di dusan di ta yong di ene kotong na kondu je gwa ro ta dina shin ta pagi ta kashi kotong di magawa ji go re kashi kotong di dewa ji go re kashi kotong indi zewa jigo re ta kallabu re ta pake nijungi ta di tohne pena midubo bungi dindishi inani ene pake tong di ta kallabu ta shatagi pungushi dishi jigirwa ta pake chanchu sengi gyunde menga duna dindi tendengi ji ina ta pama chinyung yochi tsera mongbo ne pama chinyung ingi ta gadin chinchi nawa sha yungu re dili zewa jigo re 다 그게 돈이는 공부 수침부 여등이지나 이번에 부스에 차를 보내 가게 돼. 좋아. 디지디 뭐부지그래디 수수료 따당 미저 왕기 가시 상기비 주를 상기비 주도거라 다 정신 상기비 주도에 돈이 도시에 얘기도 주를 가시를 제와기비 주를 가시를 도시기비 주도에 Kashila Kondoke, Chesanta, Mozilla, Karike, Majesiedi, Kurang Tsunamba Desha Joina, Samal Chibo Yongorwa, Momboina, Raboreti, the Pedi Rabore, Chabata Yoma, Nimuja Same Mombo, that is Same Mombo to us, that the Pera Palavaya, she Savachin, Same Mombo Tomaro, that Kajira watching the Same Mombo Tomodo, Dinashin, meeting the time, the Tobagi to Munzinchi, 제 쿠란기 주나바 대조이나 철질 집어 용으로가 요금이다. 배 항송 두고도 철주민 더 용으로서 제상 수수수 다샤조레스.
Now taking an example, for example, she was talking about like in the market where there are all sorts of different people, so different people come together and take the example of a girl. So there's one object, so there's one phenomenon, one entity, this girl. Well, different people perceive this girl, kind of label, designate that girl in different ways. So the parents of this girl, they perceive this girl as a daughter, as their child, and so therefore they experience love, they have love towards this girl. If she has some kind of lover, boyfriend, or a husband, well then there'll be desire that is directed towards that girl. From the side of the girl, she sees her parents again with love and compassion. She has that perception of her parents. Then the girl also, if there is an enemy, someone who doesn't like the girl, upon seeing her, they will get angry. There will be aversion arising in their continuum upon seeing this girl. So therefore, for some people, when they see her, there will be displeasure, there will be dismay. Some people who like her, it will be a pleasant feeling, there will love arise. Those who meditate on the ugliness, meditate on ugliness, well, they would just see a body that is made of bones and blood, so they wouldn't perceive anything attractive, but just meditate on the unattractiveness would perceive this girl in a different way. Then a person who meditates on the techniques of generating bodhicitta, such as the 6 causes and 1 effect method, they will regard this girl as having been their mother for many, many lifetimes, and they perceive the kindness of that girl. And then with regard to a person who's meditating on emptiness, when they perceive this girl, they perceive the lack of true or inherent existence, the emptiness of that girl. So therefore, depending on the different awarenesses, the different perceptions that people have when they look at her, so it's due to the designation or the interpretation by their personal awarenesses, then looking at that girl can become a cause for becoming enlightened. If they take, for example, the girl as the object of meditation, meditation on emptiness, or the object of generating bodhicitta, the girl may also become the cause for them to have desire, to have actual love and care towards that girl, and so if the girl was really to exist, if she were to exist from her own side, that there was an aspect coming from her side, that this was all coming from her, without depending on the conceptual mind or depending on the awareness, then everyone would react the same. Of course, this is just all, it's a very coarse kind of example, so this needs to be taken further, but the point is here that there's just one person here, but many different ways in which this person appears, this girl in this case, with a girl, how she appears to the different awarenesses. So to each and every different person, she appears in a different way. In other words, she's designated differently, she's imputed differently. So therefore, this shows, hence that phenomena are just imputed, it's just designated by the mind. What we perceive is merely designated by the mind.
但事实上呢，我们现在这是一个很粗糙的例子，似乎我们看见的都是这个水蓝色的 iPad 的外壳。不过我们如果很仔细去讨论的话，我们大家所看到的这个水蓝色，它不会是一个相同的。那所以呢，今天正是因为只是以分别心安立而看到这个我们看到这个形象，所以我们看到的东西呢都不会是一样的。如果今天是有境界给过来一个形象，投注过来一个形象的话，我们大家看的都应该是一样的。但事实上，现在我们看到的不仅是不一样，而且可能还有天差地远这样子一个差别。那从这里我们就可以证明一件事情，就是其实我们所有见到的这一切，我们所有生烦恼的这种生烦恼处，完全都是由我们各自的分别心去安立出来的而已。
其实当我不记得，你阿玛嘞，那对不给打不了。 제선다 디케메레 시디다 조각이 따버져 자연과 제선 딜레디다 디나신 디미레스 디심젠레스 디미다버레스 렌드레레레레 따도라.
So therefore it's one entity, one phenomenon, and so this is the mother. So this is mother then, this is in that case it's like imputed by the daughter, or this is the daughter, this is imputed by the mother. So then this is my wife, well that is imputed by the husband imputes that. So therefore, these different imputations, this is perhaps a human being, this is a sentient being, this is impermanent, so all this is just imputed, each one of them is imputed.
제가 디 아마레 난 다버차소 제가 디레디 다에디 미자와 요레 디 다세디 카르 다기지 디오디르다 다세디 카르.
So here saying this is a mother. So what happens here is that one imputes this, it's just imputed, and there's different types of imputation. But the question here is, what is the object of imputation? What is the place, or what is the actual thing that is being imputed?
다에 미자오지 다세지르와 참매기 이디 다세지부디 카르 어디게제다.
So different imputations, different designations, but it's one object. So the object of one's designation is one, and the question is, what is that?
카르 다세디.
What is it? What is the object of negation? What is that? Thing that you impute on.
카르 다세디.
What is that? What is the object? Oh, sorry, what's the object of imputation? What is the object that you impute on? The object of designation.
다세디 나와레시.
So the tense thing is the appearance. And so English was asking, so the object of imputation, that which you impute on, is just the appearance.
나와시디 나와레시 따도르. 따사소 나와시 따소.
When you say the appearance, then you're again imputing. You're imputing the appearance. You've already you've imputed again.
미참에게 나와도 되겠는데.
And you don't think everyone is an appearance.
단 다세디 카르레스 다디 카르라.
So what is the object that you impute upon? What would you say?
다세디 유바지레 라네 따도 유바신 따도라.
So it's something that exists. You impute on the basis of something that exists.
딜라 디전에 딜라니 대대베기다 칼라르스나 다세디 제도메바스 이내 켄사시즈리에 제도메발라 내직 따도 레디 이내 칙디기 토네 고하디 레토그랬다 베기 제도메바레스 제해요 말이다 또바 제자다 자기 그 지신도 제해요 말에 제도메발라디야 제도메바디 제도로 이내 제도메발라에디 고디에디 또바기 지신도 아니 베기 주투예요 말에 자기 지신도 제도예요 말에 디 외니 지텐디지레스.
So what would the Sautrantika, according to the Sautrantika system, they would say that this object, that which is imputed, is beyond expression, it's expressible, it's inexpressible. It is beyond expression, it's inexpressible. And nonetheless, they impute. So saying it is inexpressible, but they still express that it is inexpressible. They still express the object, even that inexpressibility, even that is expressed. So anyway, what that actually means is that the object, when you express, when you talk about the object that is imputed, or when you take it to mind conceptually, actually you cannot express it exactly the way it exists. You cannot take it to mind conceptually exactly the way it exists. So this is what it means here, that it is inexpressible, what is beyond expression.
那因此我们说，那个我们说的安立处或者施舍处，它本身的这种无可言说的状态呢，是没有办法用生词，就是言语这个生词，或者是用所谓的分别心去完整的把它掌握住的。
是他多半是引申节规定的这大主播嘛都，可不觉得没被摘的了，大群主头个嘛，主头个要嘛的。
So therefore, you have a conceptual consciousness and dependence on which you impute something, but actually you never get at the actual object that is imputed, because that is inexpressible. So you cannot really engage the mind properly with regard to the actual object, since that is beyond expression. So you don't really get at the object. So therefore, if that is the case, well, you cannot actually be angry with that you want to be angry with. In reality, it's impossible to get angry with that because that is inexpressible. So you're not really angry getting with the actual object. What you're getting angry with is just merely imputed, it's merely designated.
La due jane ta di ni pena su da wi na thong ya yu ji na ta mi shi ya gu res mi shi gi kan se ne di chö de me che di kan sa gu tu gu res na mi shi sing di ze gi thon chu na ba de sha yu ji res pa gi pa ju jo ma yin ba ji chu na ba de sha yu ji re chu na ba de sha yu di pa yu gi ni chu kan di ne ji ma ji xin ko ra mi shi di do ru res pa sa nang du res.
So therefore, it is tendency. So if in reality you cannot get at the object with the conceptual consciousness, if that does not in accord with whatever you perceive of the conceptual consciousness does not accord with reality, so you're not getting at the actual object, now then how do you know that this substance is inexpressible? How do you know this inexpressible substance, in other words? How can you actually know this object which is beyond expression? Well, according to the system, they would say that if you have a physical form, for example, a visual form, then it would be the eye consciousness that knows it. So the eye consciousness would know the object because the object from its own side, it appears from its own side to such an eye consciousness. So it kind of aspect is thrown onto this eye consciousness in the sense that one knows exactly the object the way it actually exists.
Dilana yang di shebare di mishire di mobore di midabare sin ya dalsegi chedme bi zeji yoro ta di kanda sa gu res yidi ta mishi di nyam sunyo rang rik sin ji she ta di ha gu res.
So then what about this consciousness, this awareness, this eye consciousness, this being impermanent, this perceiving something? How do you know that? Something that is also imputed. How do you know that? What it is, the self-knower of that eye consciousness. It's the self-knower which perceives or experiences the eye consciousness. That is that which perceives.
Mishi kharam le tagero di shebares di mobares di migi shebares di seshin rigores mabush ta ru da ta segi ta zugu zuse di khares na ya jude me be ji yoro o de di jude me be di ta khar sui ha gu re yobadi tobagi di che tu ba maro le di mishi kharan yo sun yo rang ri di.
So just repeated this point again, saying that, well, when we say the eye consciousness, we impute onto the eye consciousness. This is an eye consciousness, this is an awareness, this is a functioning thing. It is impermanent, it is clear and known. All these characteristics that we impute onto the eye consciousness, well, this kind of inexpressible substance, what knows that inexpressible substance, which actually this is what one imputes upon, it is that inexpressible eye consciousness. And what knows that inexpressible eye consciousness? And the answer to that in the system would be the self-knower. The self-knower of the eye consciousness.
等等这些呢，有一个所谓的无可言之之处，这是这叫分控制。
让历史呢，拍个米西的到底你写不现代就给这写不满意不成？但拍个越这不赢呢，我不现代的同样的越的经济通了吧？越可能同样的了，让越现代就当我不到，可能让他思维我都，可能让给忘记他一切都多。其实他我不现在的现在的写不行，写不可能现在的。 可能让思维我的见，可能让你信吧，可能你吃些进来的，我爹的嘛都，第几个些个，弟弟团的让你几些嘛都样，现在进来过嘛的。
So when we think about self-knower or another in Tibetan, so the self-knower here, well, actually with regard to the I consciousness, it perceives something other, some other object outside. I mean, an external object in the sense of light waves. So there's light actually coming from the outside, which is then makes it possible for the I consciousness to perceive an object. But then the I consciousness itself, it also has that clarity. It has that clarity that enables it to perceive its object. So it's the I consciousness that perceives itself, or actually, to be more precise, it's a part of the I consciousness. It's an aspect of that I consciousness. So an aspect that looks outward and an aspect that looks at the I consciousness itself. So it's that aspect, that self-knower, which looks at the I consciousness and knows it, or is aware of it. So it's that this aspect of clarity that the self-knower is aware of.
다 개발지 가르선다 디지도 주도미 비제니 차로도 다 미통에리나 수 셰베딩도 주도미 비제지 통에기 수기도 주도미 비제지 주도미 제니 기지시고도.
So here we talk about two inexpressible substances here. One is the awareness itself, and the other is the object, the physical object, the visual object that is the object of the awareness.
Niela dilana tiusere. Di amare, di pomore, di midabare, di mire sini, ta de di, ta egi chedi, ta ama yimba, ane pomo yimba, mi yimba, o dindri dige di, ane kalla urta, ngochi, zuga zhona jingwa do yamaro dige di, chen zechi, ngochi, ine ta, lola so sherbe di wando chene, soso ni yudeba, tobi wana soso ni yudeba, o di chagwa.
So when we say, so Geshe-la is saying, well, first this explanation would be helpful here. So saying mother, saying daughter, impermanent, person, or human being, and then being a mother, being a daughter, being impermanent, being a human being. So these phenomena that are imputed here, now they're all of one entity. So they're all of one entity. So they appear to the mind differently. So if it's like a mother who's also a daughter, who's impermanent, who's a human being. So here, it's one actually object, one object, and whatever appears to the mind, what appears to the conceptual consciousness appears individually different, but it's actually one object that one focuses on, and therefore this mother, this girl, and so forth, are all of one nature. All of one nature. So these objects that are the object of different conceptual consciousnesses, they are all of one nature.
다 디간다 디토데베 시에체 아니 딜라디 다 주도메비 제지어로 디토덤데 버체 딜라 다샤 요기다 아마 임바 미임바 미다바 임바 시에도죠 아니 군저데 버체 데바니도 참으라.
So then, on top of that, now here this is the Tantrika school. So according to the Tantrika school, this inexpressive substance here, this inexpressible substance here, well, that is ultimate truth. Whereas kind of that imputation of mother, being a daughter, being impermanent, and so forth, those are conventional truths.
수저 셰베딩도 주드미 제직제 에 파게 유강라 다 조지이나 조지이신 파조 유이딩도 주드미 제직 근데 요 말레스 다 조지시에디 기시 파게니 추미시르 추남바 데데버지 유나 다 코들진 두만 처네 에 추남바 데 기지 시오래 에 둘진디에 나세기야 디제나 차시 처네 둘기 시온데 타르는 둘진 참여지도 두고래 둘진 참여 요 말에 둘진 참여 샤나다 리포던 기도 So
So this having been the Tantrika school now, from the point of view of the Chittamatra school, they do not talk about an inexpressible object from the side, so like from the side of the awareness or from the side of the object. They don't draw this distinction of an inexpressible object and an inexpressible awareness. So rather, when they say there's a table, for example, so there's a table over there, so the eye consciousness perceives the table. Well, what it is that there are many particles coming together, and therefore this table, if that was really, and they say if that were really the case, that if you have many particles come together, and then there's a table perceived, one would therefore have to accept a partless particle. One would have to accept that there's a partless particle on the basis of which one is then able to perceive the table. And they say there is no such partless particle. It's logically inconsistent to accept such, and this is something I spoke about earlier on. So therefore they say that there is no partless particle, and so therefore there's also no existence, no external existence from the side of the object, which the Chittamatra school holds. Due to the absence of partless particles, they say therefore there is no existence, external existence from the side of the object.
没有办法说是从外境投注过来任何一个形象。
这样对了对着呢，那第米给写吧的，但就是人这个，第就是同意你写吧的，第就是的是你写的，如果真的经过都要嘛的，第就是在这，可是是呢，米写个在大个，那就是了那用过的是吹，但别人米啷个，那就是行呢，米啷个就是拍照呢要嘛的。 能写个可能让去年你就是都是下流有几类是，写把拉下流给这么的，写把第二就是都下流，我写把引把那那么的就是了那有也去。
So saying that, well, here in this case we talk about the eye consciousness and then an eye consciousness perceiving a table. So actually being a table, and an eye consciousness that perceives the table, when one puts one's finger onto it, there's only one object. There really is just one object. Because here the table merely appears, there is no outside table, it merely appears to the awareness. So it's similar to a dream, where in the dream a table appears as if it was over there, but there's actually no table over there. This is a mistaken appearance. So here likewise, when we talk about the awareness that perceives this table, so actually it is actually a part of the mind, it's a nature of a mind that appears as the table. It's a kind of entity of the mind that appears as the table. So there is no actual table that is separate.
就是那个心识本身要这样用才对，就是这个体境其实是心识，但是它显现出来的呢是一个桌子的形象。
真的，看到刚通的呢，长嘛，这个真的是西北定的在地毛都没定的，但去年去了了呀，那得去。
So whatever we see, therefore, if we point our finger at it, whatever it is, the object is a substance of the mind, and we mistakenly perceive it to be externally existent. So there's this mistake with regard to the appearance of the object existing external to the mind.
那第几句，你看了我的他，而且大成语呢，说这些来了。 그게 다 조지는 디미다 바레스 엔티 조지레스 다두 다 코이드미 계주모 부지어로 디싱레 디조지레 디수레 디리 계주모 예비 능로네 디조지레 디수 미다바는 디미다바레스 디능로네 직태무도 계주직 미다바레 다두 신디게디 파유 직태차로 그래서 미다바스 임바 세디 我等这个米大瓦银巴特别大什么嘞？谁的当？米大瓦银巴当，就是银巴，属银巴都，可是这个他的说的特别大什么嘞？是切着了，的说切的特别往给切完的，谁的能落了？的米大瓦银巴的特别大什么嘞？是过的，大了是过的。你的说切的特别大什么嘞？谁的？这些钱来哪有了？可是你这个中的经过都有嘛了？ 지금 미라 샤데디 다 도베기 파이 다조레스 기제디 체로 저 디럽차위 체라 다디 미다바 임바 저디 도베다서 임바디 디기토 고토베지 그래서는 미다바 임바 수디 신나츠마 파유 직 추주음도 소소 디게디네 어디 얘는 디지신고도
So therefore, for those of you who studied the scriptures, this kind of explanation may be helpful. So when we talk about the table, saying that it is a table, this being a table, this being impermanent. So here there are different kind of characteristics that one takes to mind. So it is wood, or it is made from wood, it is a table, it is physical form, it is impermanent. So let's take the impermanent. So it's like something we almost like we can separate out this characteristic. As in like we can take that characteristic, we separate this, and everything else we leave aside. So it is impermanent, it is a physical form. So actually when we point at the actual object, it is just one thing. It's one thing that we can actually point at, it's that table. However, we can kind of crystallize out these characteristics, we take out these characteristics, and from that it is clear that this is just designated, just imputed by that conceptual consciousness, which takes out a certain characteristic and leaves away the rest. So Vishen was saying it's therefore this conceptual consciousness, that kind of imputing conceptual consciousness, we take certain characteristics from the object, although these different characteristics exist on just one object or based on just one object.
可是我们在指的时候，我们指的就是一个法，同一个法，指陈数都是同一个，所以我们说的是有分别心安立的。同样的道理，当我们说这个桌子是无常符，当我们讲出是无常的时候，这也是一个由分别心安立出来的这个概念，必须要理解才行。因为我们刚才讲过，当我们说到是无常的时候，这个是无常是怎么出来的呢？就是我们的分别心排除了其他的特质，只拉出是无常这个概念，而说是无常。所以呢，我们讲到说可以区分我们说同一个法上有很多不同的这个名词，或者说它的指出某一个特别的名词是无常这样的名词，这两者都是有分别心安立的概念。
但第九字人是你的九字音不的，特别大把什么人是对，那九字定义没大把的，所以他基础现在的说切的，特别往给人是国的列出的，都得给这些。那当地的这个这样音嘛了，第九字人是对，米西的说切的，米西的九字是米西九字同米西的九字是你切就，你切的特别切完人是国的列边头呢，那九字音嘛的特别大什么人是。国的内容对那甚至没给他大瓦帮这些个就是意思的，他差不多讲。
So then saying this is a table, saying something being a table. So this is merely imputed by conceptual consciousness. Impermanent, something being impermanent, being a physical form. So this kind of crystallizing out these qualities, kind of separating, dividing these different qualities. Well, this is the Chitta Mantra school. This is the Satantrika school, which gives that kind of explanation. And then now, with regard to the Chitta Mantra school, you have to take it to the Chitta Mantra school in the sense that you have the eye consciousness and the table. You have the mind and the table. So here, where previously we talked about it from a conceptual point of view, from the conceptual mind point of view, here in the Chitta Mantra school, you have the basis of engagement of the conceptual consciousness.
去区分出演示跟桌子本身，把它区分出来之后，然后那个桌子才在演示当中成立。那这是一个我是跟老师说，这是相对那个进步度来说比较更维系的一个主张。
就是第九字的第九字字米写的是你切的，都别切完的嘛都，这一点的你切要嘛的，这几个是给这的内容的。就是他停止一切呢，那就是引发性的，米西的罗素就是引发性下跌的，特别大把上面是吧？对人现在要嘛的使用的，那米西的摩他的都没办的，大块到处的，那地切了，那 로디게 아니 미실이 뭐지 임버디 디체라 아니 네버테이 뭐지 뭐 디디 제오나 아니 신에 센센베기 다 다와간 데도와.
So therefore here in the Chittamatra school, when you say this is a table, this is the eye consciousness preceding the table, again the conceptual consciousness differentiating between them, but actually they're one nature. So in the Chittamatra school they would say those two are of one nature. So it's just merely imputed, that difference between them is merely imputed. So in actuality, what is actually there is the eye consciousness, the eye consciousness and the table, they're just of one nature. So they are not, they lack being of a different nature, the absence of them being of a different nature. That is understood here, that what you point at is actually just one phenomenon that is of one nature. So therefore, having understood that the table and the mind, the eye consciousness that receives the table, are not of a different substantial entity or not of a different nature, then one can understand after that they are actually of one nature, that the table and the awareness that receive it are of one nature. So this is the Chittamatra school, the Chittamatra school.
아니 비전하는 지 비주지도 컨트리스나 아니 조지 시비 타주비 실 조지 레비 타주비 실 에나랑 생기 요마레스 아디지도 전에 딜라 디케지 시용도 아니 디더데비 시에지다 센세비 시에지 타라리 거라 다 타라 체디 도신 체바이나 타라다다 체토 그래.
So in the scriptures, the way this is expressed, this kind of relationship, the way it is expressed, is saying that the table is not by way of its own characteristics the object of engagement which is engaged by the mind, by the sound that expresses table. So in other words, the table is not by way of its own characteristic the object that is expressed by the sound that expresses table. So here one can come to see that there is a difference between, in terms of coarseness and roughness, between the Sutra school and the Chittamatra. So there's an assertion, there's a difference of coarseness and subtlety. So I repeat this. The table does not, by way of its own characteristic, is not by way of its own characteristic the basis of engagement when it is being expressed by a sound that expresses table. So the sound expresses table, the table is the basis of that sound that expresses table, but it's not that basis by way of its own characteristics.
아니 센센베 주시 도베 다섬 세기 점저디기 아니 제신디 제그레스 송진 제신디 제그레스 유유진 제신디 임바 제그레스 디송요레.
So we cannot go into all of these explanations here, but basically according to the eloquent speech by Lama Tsongkhapa, when saying that here this the sound or that the physical phenomenon is not by way of its own nature the basis for the sound that expresses that, then that means that it's merely imputed, the sound, the object that is expressed by the sound is merely imputed as being the basis for what the sound expresses. So what does the word merely here express? That the subject and the awareness are not of a different entity. So the subject and the object are not of a different entity. So saying that the object is the basis for the sound that expresses this, that is the basis for the conceptual mind, that being merely imputed, here the word mere says that this kind of negates that the object and the subject are different substantial entities.
디 벤제는 무치기 벤제스는 잡으셔기 디 차라리 이와 치에 된다라. 아니 민대샤점도 도베다서 여와치는 소요. 민대샤점이 고아디도 도베다서 고아 카가레스 여와치는 도 소요. 나상진의 남는 찍버래. 이내 벤진의 무치디 여와치요. 디 여와치에 디긴 다다다디 고 다다 고고해지. 된지지요.
So therefore, Benjamin Sandaka, in order to kind of point out the difference, in order to set forth the difference between the Satojika and the Chittamatra from the point of view of one being subtler and one being coarser, in order to do so, he uses different vocabulary in the sense that he talks about being merely imputed by different terms and names, and being merely imputed by conceptual consciousness. So these two phrases actually mean the same thing, being imputed independence on name and term, and being imputed independence on conceptual consciousness. Though they mean the same thing, here Benjamin Sandaka uses those two phrases differently in order to set forth or indicate the difference of subtlety and coarseness between the two systems.
So after this, there's another kind of quotation that Geshe-la Patriv, but we will not give it because it's Benjamin Sandaka, so otherwise it becomes like we're kind of like the Benjamin Sandaka people. Nakada diso mingde shazam mare, mingde shazam da jukshi ting do mingde shazam da to kasa rang sengi meba de ne chi re sin yo chesa khatu de la ma chi di mingde sha de do ni ma no cheka le na. Ani thabar tu di khatu de le pinje mu chi chui di le shin ning bro sen zen de chui chi bi ka ji ka wi ni su du jing si ro. Le de chi wa pe ji yi dan yo se ze wo kue chung se zhe ba da su la ro. Di to ne le shin ning ma ge zhe ba nga khatu gi 강에디 센터지 마주나 디 보시시에게 믿어들라 시부지 다디 디시 자단디기 토네 폐기 저번가 거두기 강에디 그 주시타라 이와치에디 따다 태임 그드나 신의 빈지를 무치디를 보시시는 따다지 되기도 고소부리 지구다 But it's basically there's a difference here between Benjamin Sandaka and other systems. So we're here some quote that is given in the writings of Benjamin Sandaka. So here usually one doesn't take this literally but interprets it. So then Geshe-la went into a more deeper explanation that I cannot translate. 미지를 하게 불륜 수요스러워. 이상하지를 불륜 수요스러워. 불륜 대행 치료는 내용들 아무 저거 가면은 주지. 부부들아 아니 칼라스나 아마나 로유 말라스네다 니들들 아마 가르쳤었는데 아마 나로 로유 말라 나서스 이것이 뭐지로 알게 되었어